Welcome back, friends. Today we're going to talk about an organ that works quietly in the background but has an incredible amount of power: your liver. If you don't take proper care of it over time, it can develop fatty liver, turn cirrhotic, and eventually fail, which can be life-threatening. Your liver is responsible for more than 500 vital functions, from filtering toxins and processing nutrients to keeping your body in balance. It's truly the ultimate processing plant built right into your body. For a long time, people believed that fatty liver only came from drinking too much alcohol. But nowadays, the main culprit is actually the foods we eat every single day. I know a lot of you feel overwhelmed and even frustrated because the information online is so conflicting. That's why in this video, I'm going to break things down clearly so you can finally understand how your liver really works, and most importantly, how to protect it. Let's start by uncovering one of the biggest questions: what foods should we avoid? Eat smart. Protect your liver the right way. One common piece of advice you'll see everywhere is cut back on salt because sodium makes you retain water. At first glance, this sounds right. Sodium does attract water, but here's the truth. This only becomes an issue if you have certain medical conditions like hormone imbalances, endocrine tumors, or kidney failure. In those cases, the body can't regulate sodium properly. For the average healthy person, though, salt has very little to do with fatty liver, so that advice is misleading. On the other hand, there's one warning I completely agree with: avoid added sugars. Refined sugar is one of the main drivers of fat buildup in the liver, and trust me, we'll dive much deeper into that later. Now, another food group often blamed is red meat. People say it's dangerous because it's high in saturated fat. While it's true that red meat contains saturated fat, that doesn't automatically mean it causes fatty liver. The science here is far more nuanced, so don't rush to cut red meat completely out of your diet. And then we have fried foods, another usual suspect. Critics say they're bad because they're loaded with fat and calories. This is partly correct. Fried foods aren't exactly a health food. But the bigger issue isn't just the calories, it's the quality of the oils, used especially when they have been reheated and reused over and over, producing compounds that are truly harmful to your liver. The real danger with fried foods isn't simply the calories or even the fat content. It's the type and quality of the oils being used. Almost every fried dish you'll find at restaurants or fast food chains is made with industrial seed oils, often labeled as vegetable oils. These oils are naturally unstable and highly sensitive to heat. To make them usable for deep frying, manufacturers put them through harsh processes: bleaching, deodorizing, oxidizing, essentially breaking them down until they become rancid and toxic. That's why fried foods cooked in these oils can do so much damage to your liver. Now, if you were to enjoy fried food once in a while, but instead used a stable fat like coconut oil, or even traditional animal fats such as lard, your body would handle it far better. The key isn't just fried food equals sign bad, it's understanding the fuel you're using to fry it. Clearing up a big myth: you are what you eat. Let's tackle a common misconception: the phrase "you are what you eat." On the surface, it sounds logical. People assume that if you eat saturated fat, then your body automatically stores saturated fat. But let's think about it more carefully. Take a cow, for example. A cow's body and its meat are loaded with saturated fat. But ask yourself, where did that saturated fat come from? Cows don't go around eating bacon butter or steaks. They eat grass. And through an amazing natural process called biotransformation, the cow converts the carbohydrates and nutrients from grass into saturated fat stored in its body. Now, here's the important part. Humans go through a similar process, though obviously we don't graze on grass. In us, biotransformation happens when we consume more energy than we actually need. The body takes that excess fuel, whether it's sugar, starch, or other calories, and transforms it into fat for storage. That stored fat may show up as saturated fat in the body, but it didn't necessarily come from eating saturated fat directly. So the takeaway here is simple. The fat in your body is not a one-to-one reflection of the fat on your plate. It's largely determined by how much extra energy you're giving your body and how your metabolism decides to store it. Whenever we talk about fat in the body, we can't ignore one key player: insulin. Think of insulin as your body's ultimate storage hormone. When there's more energy than you need, insulin steps in and helps tuck that extra fuel away, often in the form of fat. That's why in humans, the saturated fat found inside the body isn't simply from eating saturated fat. It's mostly the result of too much fuel combined with high insulin levels. This is where a lot of the confusion begins. People often hear that when the liver is loaded with fat, particularly saturated fat, it becomes insulin resistant. And yes, that part is absolutely true. But here's the twist. It's not the saturated fat you ate that caused the problem. Instead, it's the other way around. The constant overload of calories and the excess insulin production lead to more fat being created and stored inside the liver. Eventually, the liver becomes so congested that it can no longer respond properly to insulin, the real cause of fatty liver overload. So what's truly behind fatty liver? It all comes down to overwhelm. When your liver is given more work than it can realistically handle, it starts to back up, like a clogged drain. And what clogs it up the fastest are substances that only the liver can process. If every cell in your body can handle a nutrient, it's rarely a problem. But when only the liver can deal with it, the burden becomes overwhelming. Let's break this down into the 4 biggest culprits. Alcohol. This one's obvious. That's why alcohol is heavily regulated. You need to be an adult to buy it. And even then, moderation is always stressed. Your liver has to do 100% of the work to metabolize alcohol, which is why it's such a burden. Fructose. Now, here's the one that hardly anyone talks about. People know sugar is bad, but they don't fully understand why. Regular table sugar is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. And fructose is metabolized exclusively by the liver. So if someone consumes 100 grams of sugar in a day, which, let's be honest, isn't unusual in today's diet, that's 50 grams of pure fructose slamming straight into the liver. Over time, that constant load clogs it up just like alcohol does. Toxins. Your liver is the body's main detox center. It's responsible for neutralizing and filtering out countless toxins from the environment, food, and even normal metabolism. But if the liver is already busy processing alcohol and fructose, its capacity to clean out toxins is reduced. The result: a dangerous backlog where toxins start to accumulate in your system. Insulin. Finally, we circle back to insulin. On its own, insulin isn't the main trigger of fatty liver. But once your liver is already fatty, a lifestyle that keeps insulin levels chronically high turns the problem into a vicious cycle. Insulin blocks fat burning inside the liver, worsens insulin resistance, and keeps the organ trapped in a state of dysfunction. Now, here's the hard truth. You can't reverse a fatty liver if your insulin levels are still running high. Once you understand the real root cause, the roadmap to recovery actually becomes pretty straightforward. It all comes down to knowing what you absolutely must avoid. First up is the most obvious: alcohol. We all recognize that too much drinking can lead to cirrhosis and liver failure. That one's no surprise. But the second culprit is just as damaging and far sneakier: sugar. And I'm not just talking about table sugar you add to your coffee or desserts. I mean all forms of sugar, dead or natural. Many people think natural sugars from fruit are somehow healthier, but here's the reality: your liver doesn't know the difference. Fructose is fructose. Yes, added sugar is dangerous because it's so concentrated. You can easily rack up large amounts in a short time. But even with fruit, if you go overboard, it's the same problem. Imagine eating watermelon, bananas, mangoes, and pineapple all day thinking you're doing something healthy. In truth, you could still end up consuming 100 to even 200 grams of sugar, and half of that is fructose, which only your liver can process. A small handful of berries. Totally fine, but polishing off bowl after bowl of fruit as a free pass to health, that's a big mistake. The starch trap. The next category to watch out for is starches. Starches are made of glucose, which quickly turns into blood sugar, driving insulin higher. And remember, insulin is the very hormone that locks fat inside your liver. If your liver is still healthy, you can get away with moderate amounts of starch, since your body can manage the glucose and insulin response. But once you're already on the path to fatty liver, every extra starch-heavy meal is like throwing gasoline on the fire. And it doesn't matter if it's natural or processed. Sure, processed starches are worse. They've been stripped of fiber and broken down, so your body absorbs them at lightning speed. But even natural starches can push your insulin too high when your liver is already struggling. A lot of people assume that switching from white rice to brown rice or from white flour to whole wheat makes a huge difference. But in reality, the difference is very small. Both still break down into almost pure glucose. And remember what glucose does? It raises your blood sugar and triggers insulin. On top of that, we need to be extra cautious with foods fried in so-called vegetable oils. These plant-based industrial oils are highly processed, chemically altered, and extremely unstable when exposed to heat. By the time they're used for frying, they've already oxidized, turning toxic and inflammatory. Eating foods cooked in these oils doesn't just give your liver extra work, it actively damages it and accelerates the strain. Reversing disease versus maintaining health. Here's where a lot of people get confused. They say, well, I eat rice and potatoes sometimes, and I feel fine. And you know what? That might be true, for now. But there's a massive difference between maintaining health and actually reversing a condition. If you're insulin sensitive and your liver is functioning normally, your body can handle small amounts of starch without much trouble. But if you're already dealing with fatty liver, high insulin, or early signs of insulin resistance, the rules change completely. To heal, you have to be far stricter than someone who's just trying to maintain good health. The truth about whole grains. Now let's talk about one of the most overrated foods on every so-called healthy list: whole grains. They're often marketed as a superfood, but let's break that down. The main reason whole grains get praised is simply because they're considered better than the worst options, like sugar or white bread. But think about that: being slightly better than sugar doesn't make something genuinely healthy. It's like saying a broken bicycle is better than no transportation. Technically true, but still not ideal. Yes, whole grains do have a little fiber, some protein, and trace nutrients. But the majority of what you're eating is still glucose, and it gets broken down quickly. That leads to blood sugar spikes, insulin surges, and the roller coaster energy crashes that follow. To make matters worse, grains are among the top food allergens worldwide. Wheat and gluten sensitivities are well known, but many people also react negatively to oats, rice, or even corn. In fact, it's estimated that most people have at least some level of sensitivity to grains, even if they don't realize it. If your liver is healthy, you're insulin sensitive, and you tolerate grains fairly well, then yes, you might be able to enjoy them occasionally without major problems. Just remember, moderation is key. Don't go overboard, and definitely don't make the mistake of thinking that today's modern wheat is a health food. At best, it's something you can get away with in small amounts, but it's certainly not going to reverse fatty liver disease. Now let's shift gears to something that gets thrown around everywhere: the idea of superfoods. People absolutely love this word. It sounds exciting, almost magical. Entire grocery store aisles and marketing campaigns are built on the promise that one special food can transform your health. But I want to set the record straight. I have a serious issue with the very concept of superfoods. The problem with the superfood myth. Here's a simple thought experiment. Imagine you're being exposed to mercury every single day. Is there a single vitamin or supplement you could take that would truly keep you healthy while that mercury keeps building up in your system? The answer is no. At best, a vitamin might make you tolerate the poison a little longer, but you're still going to get sicker and sicker. You won't get better until you remove the exposure. Or think of it this way: imagine a lake that's been poisoned where fish are dying and floating to the surface. Could we just sprinkle in some antioxidants or pour in a miracle nutrient and suddenly the lake would be restored to perfect health? Of course not. As long as we keep dumping toxins into the lake, nothing we add will undo the damage. The same principle applies to our bodies. When we get caught up in the hype about superfoods, we're missing the big picture. We start believing there's a magic food, like a pill, that will protect us no matter what else we eat or what toxins we're exposed to. But that's simply not how biology works. If your liver is healthy, you're insulin sensitive, and your body tolerates grains reasonably well, then yes, you can probably enjoy them here and there without too much trouble. Just keep it moderate, and don't fool yourself into thinking modern wheat is some kind of health food. It isn't. At best, you might get away with it, but it's definitely not going to reverse a fatty liver. Now, let's dive into a concept that has exploded in popularity: superfoods. This word is everywhere, on magazine covers, in grocery stores, on supplement labels. People love the idea that one powerful food can magically transform their health. But here's the truth: I have a real problem with the very idea of superfoods. Why the superfood hype is misleading. Let's run a thought experiment. Suppose you're exposed to mercury every single day. Is there any vitamin you could take that would truly protect you while the mercury keeps building up inside your body? Of course not. At best, a supplement might help you tolerate it for a little while, but eventually the damage piles up. You won't get better until you stop the exposure. Now picture a polluted lake where fish are dying and floating belly up. Could we throw in some antioxidants and suddenly restore the lake to perfect health? No way. If the toxins keep flowing in, nothing you add will make those fish thrive again. It's the same with us. When we chase after superfoods, we're missing the bigger picture. We buy into the illusion that there's a magical food like a miracle pill that will erase the damage from poor habits. But biology doesn't work like that. When we remove the root cause of a problem, something powerful happens. The body finally gets a chance to heal. Instead of just masking symptoms, true recovery comes when the system that was broken starts working again. The pain, the fatigue, the dysfunction, they fade not because we've silenced the signals, but because we've restored normal function. That's why I prefer to think of food not as superfood versus everything else, but simply as good food or bad food. Good food supports your body, bad food interferes with it, but there's no single miracle ingredient that overrides the damage of poor habits. Unsaturated fats, the truth behind the hype. Now let's talk about another nutrition buzzword that shows up everywhere: unsaturated fats. You've probably heard it 1,000 times. Saturated fat is bad while unsaturated fat is good. But like many things in health, the truth isn't that black and white. It depends on the type of unsaturated fat and how it's processed. The first category is monounsaturated fats, often called MUFAs. Monounsaturated fatty acids. Think of these as a macronutrient, something you eat in meaningful amounts that provides real calories and energy. Classic examples include olive oil, especially extra virgin olive oil, as well as natural fats found in meat. A lot of people believe meat is packed entirely with saturated fat, but that's a myth. In reality, about half of the fat in meat is monounsaturated, and the same goes for our own bodies. Roughly half of the fat we store is monounsaturated too. That's simply how humans are designed to store energy. So when it comes to MUFAs, they earn a big green check mark. They can be excellent for health as long as they're minimally processed. That's why high-quality olive oil is so prized. Extra virgin olive oil comes from the very first cold pressing with minimal heat and minimal pressure. This gentle process keeps the oil stable, intact, and nourishing without turning it rancid or harmful. The second category of unsaturated fat is polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs. And this is where things get messy. Monounsaturated fats are fairly stable because they only have one bend or unsaturated spot in their chemical structure. But polyunsaturated fats have multiple unsaturated bonds, which makes their molecules loose, wobbly, and extremely unstable. That instability means they react easily with oxygen, heat, and light. So when food manufacturers take these delicate oils and try to make them shelf-stable for frying, cooking, and salad dressings, they're forced to put them through harsh industrial processing. The result: oils that are oxidized, rancid, and highly inflammatory. This is why relying on vegetable oils, corn oil, soybean oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, can be such a disaster for your health. Many people have been told to replace butter or natural animal fats with hard, healthy vegetable oils. But in reality, that's one of the biggest nutritional mistakes of the past century. By making polyunsaturated oils a major source of calories, we're essentially turning an unstable, fragile fat into a macronutrient, and our bodies pay the price. Verdict: big red X. Stick to stable natural fats like olive oil or those found naturally in meat. Skip the industrial seed oils that have been cooked, bleached, deodorized, and damaged before they even reach your plate. The truth about soy and beans. Next up on the list is another group of foods that shows up on almost every politically correct health checklist: soybeans and other beans. You've probably seen the headlines: beans may help with blood sugar, or soy is associated with improved insulin resistance. Notice the wording: may help, associated with, not exactly convincing. Most of the time, these claims are based on the same argument used to defend white bread, that beans are better than grains. And sure, in certain contexts, beans might be less harmful than eating refined flour or sugar, but that doesn't automatically make them a great food for healing. To make matters worse, the vast majority of soybeans grown today are genetically modified GMO. That means they're engineered and heavily treated in ways that raise serious concerns about long-term health. And when you combine that with the fact that soy products are often processed with chemicals and additives, it becomes clear that soy is far from the miracle food it's marketed to be. As we mentioned earlier, soy is one of the top food allergens. Many people have hidden sensitivities to it, and when they consume soy, it triggers inflammatory reactions that work directly against healing. That's why I give soy both a question mark and a red X. In general, I don't recommend soy products for anyone unless we're talking about very specific, traditionally prepared foods like organic tofu or fermented miso. Now, if you're insulin sensitive and your liver is healthy, you may tolerate some lentils or other beans without much trouble. But if you're already insulin resistant or dealing with fatty liver, beans are not going to be the solution. In fact, they may simply add to the problem. Oatmeal, the healthy grain that isn't next on the list, is oatmeal, which you'll see recommended on almost every healthy food guide. Because it's often grouped under the label of fiber-rich foods. The problem is people repeat that claim without fully understanding what it really means. Yes, there's a study here or there suggesting oatmeal might slightly improve cholesterol levels in the blood compared to eating white bread. But let's be honest, that's a pretty low bar. Just because something is better than white bread doesn't automatically make it a true health food. At the end of the day, oatmeal is still mostly starch. It breaks down easily into glucose, which spikes blood sugar and insulin. And we already know that keeping insulin low is essential for reversing fatty liver. On top of that, many people are sensitive to gluten. Unless you specifically buy certified gluten-free oats, chances are your oatmeal contains at least trace amounts of gluten from cross-contamination. Even with certified gluten-free oats, there's still a phenomenon called cross-reactivity. That means the immune system, once triggered by gluten, may mistake the proteins in oats for gluten as well. The result: many people experience inflammatory reactions to oats, even if the package claims gluten-free. When it comes to oats, here's the deal. They're not the absolute worst food out there, and some people tolerate them fairly well. But if you're going to eat oats, the form makes a huge difference. Steel-cut oats are the whole grain, less processed and broken down more slowly in your body. That means the glucose trickles in gradually rather than hitting your bloodstream all at once. On the other hand, instant oats are a completely different story. They're so highly processed that your body absorbs them almost as quickly as candy. In fact, they're only a tiny step better than jelly beans in terms of how fast they spike blood sugar and insulin. So here's my verdict. If your goal is to reverse liver disease, oats get a red X. They simply aren't helpful for healing. But if you're generally healthy and insulin-sensitive, eating some steel-cut oats from time to time probably going to wreck your health. Just don't fool yourself into thinking oatmeal is some kind of liver-saving food. It's not. Coffee? The surprising responder. Next up is coffee, and this one gets a lot of attention. There have been quite a few studies suggesting that coffee may be protective against non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Notice the phrasing "may be protective," associated with, and so on. The problem is, I've never seen a clear mechanism explaining why coffee would directly protect the liver. So whenever I see that kind of research, I ask myself, compared to what? If coffee drinkers have lower rates of liver disease, what are the non-coffee drinkers consuming instead? Chances are they're drinking more soda, sweet tea, or sugary energy drinks. In that case, coffee isn't some miracle, it's just the lesser evil. That said, I'm not against coffee at all. In fact, I drink it myself. I don't believe it's harmful, and I haven't seen convincing evidence that moderate coffee consumption damages the liver. Of course, if you have weak adrenals, pounding 6 cups a day isn't wise. But for most people, 1 or 2 cups daily is perfectly fine. Coming in at number 5, we have walnuts. Personally, I consider walnuts a solid choice. They're high in protein and healthy fats while being naturally low in carbohydrates. In that way, they're really no different from other nuts like macadamias or pecans, 2 of my personal favorites. Here's why that balance matters. When a food is low in carbs, but rich in protein and fat, it's naturally satisfying. That means you'll stay full longer, experience fewer cravings, and most importantly, you'll reduce insulin spikes. Over time, that helps reverse insulin resistance, a critical factor in fighting fatty liver. So yes, walnuts get a green check mark from me, but here's the caveat: they're not a miracle cure. Too many so-called superfood lists hype up walnuts by cherry-picking studies and searching for a magical molecule that supposedly reverses disease. That's not how it works. Walnuts are a good supportive food, but eating more of them won't magically heal your liver. Omega-3s. Essential but misunderstood. Now let's move to number 4. Omega-3 fatty acids. Yes, these are technically polyunsaturated fats, but unlike the harmful processed seed oils, omega-3s are the ones our bodies truly need. They're considered essential because your body can't make them on its own. But here's the key, we only need them in small amounts for very specific roles. One of the best ways to get omega-3s is through fish oil supplements or by simply eating whole fatty fish like salmon, sardines, or mackerel. Unlike the vague claims made about other so-called superfoods, omega-3s have been studied extensively. The research shows clear mechanisms of action, leaving no doubt omega-3s are anti-inflammatory and directly address the root cause of many modern health problems. We're talking about benefits for fatty liver, cardiovascular disease, and the broader metabolic syndrome. In all of these, omega-3s help correct the underlying dysfunction, not just the symptoms. For that reason, they get a big green check mark. That said, not all omega-3s are the same, and this is where the conversation gets more interesting. Many people don't realize that the type and source of omega-3s matter a great deal, and not every product on the shelf delivers the same results. A lot of people point to flaxseed and flax oil as great sources of omega-3s. And while it's true that they contain omega-3 fatty acids, here's the catch: it's not the form your body actually needs. What we really need are the active omega-3s known as EPA and DHA. Flax oil contains a different form, ALA, which your body must convert into EPA and DHA before it can use them. If you're extremely healthy with little oxidative stress and good insulin sensitivity, your body can do this conversion fairly well. But if your health is already compromised, if you're insulin resistant or dealing with high levels of stress and inflammation, your ability to convert ALA into EPA and DHA drops dramatically. Ironically, the people who need it most are the ones least able to make that conversion. That's why flaxseed isn't a reliable source of omega-3s. That doesn't mean flax has no value. Personally, I still enjoy it. I like grinding flax seeds and mixing them with yogurt and chia seeds. But I eat them for the texture, the fiber, and other nutrients, not because I believe they'll meet my omega-3 needs, and definitely not because I think they're some miracle superfood. Omega-3s as micronutrients. Here's what's important to understand the omega-3s. We need EPA and DHA should be thought of more like micronutrients than macronutrients. In other words, they're not meant to be your main source of calories or energy. Instead, they play highly specialized roles in the body. Omega-3s are crucial for building cell membranes, serving as hormone precursors and regulating inflammation. You don't need massive amounts, you just need the right kind in the right balance. Some of the best sources are, as we've already said, fatty fish. But you can also get high-quality omega-3s from pasture-raised eggs. In fact, eating good eggs can cover most of your omega-3 requirements without needing huge portions of fish every day. If you don't have regular access to quality fish or eggs, then a high-quality fish oil supplement is a smart option. Cruciferous greens, the detox superstars. Now let's move on to number 3, cruciferous vegetables. The term cruciferous actually comes from the Latin word for cross, describing the cross-shaped flowers of plants in this family. Think broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and cabbage. What makes cruciferous veggies so powerful is that they're packed with phytonutrients, natural compounds that specifically help your liver detoxify harmful substances. These compounds give your body real support in clearing toxins, unlike so many so-called superfoods that rely only on vague claims. When we talk about cruciferous vegetables, we're looking at a powerhouse group that includes arugula, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, and even rutabaga. These foods are loaded with plant compounds that actively support your liver's detox processes. The best part? As long as you tolerate them well, you can eat them in generous amounts. The only one I'd suggest keeping an eye on is rutabaga. Because it's a root vegetable, it contains a little more starch than the leafy cruciferous options. The starch breaks down slowly, so it's not nearly as problematic as grains or potatoes. But if you're actively trying to reverse fatty liver, It's smart to go easy on rutabaga and focus more on the leafy varieties. Of course, sensitivity matters. If your body reacts negatively to a cruciferous vegetable, then it's not helping you. Always listen to your body. Number 2, meat. Now let's move on to number 2 on the list, meat. This one might surprise you because I added it myself and you almost never see it on superfood lists. In fact, meat is often left off because of the lingering fear around saturated fat and cholesterol. But here's the truth, meat is one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can eat. Meat provides high-quality protein, it's incredibly filling, and it's packed with vitamins, minerals, and amino acids your body needs to thrive. One of the most interesting points I like to make about food is sensitivity. A food might be great on paper, but if you're sensitive to it, then it's not great for you. That's one reason the carnivore diet has been gaining popularity, because many people discover that meat, especially beef, is among the least allergenic foods out there. For individuals dealing with food sensitivities, red meat often becomes the safe option. On top of that, meat is a rich source of methionine, a sulfur-containing amino acid that your body uses to make glutathione. And glutathione isn't just any antioxidant, it's the body's most powerful antioxidant, critical for protecting your cells and supporting detoxification in the liver. And yes, meat naturally contains both saturated fat and monounsaturated fat, the same types of fat we store in our own bodies. These fats are not the villains they've been made out to be. In fact, they're essential building blocks when consumed as part of a whole nutrient-rich food like meat. Both saturated fat and monounsaturated fat are remarkably stable. Once you overcome the outdated fear of saturated fat and you get your insulin levels under control, you'll find that saturated fat is actually an excellent, clean-burning energy source. Because it's stable, it doesn't easily oxidize, which means it's non-inflammatory and supportive rather than harmful. Number 1, eggs. And now we've reached the number 1 spot on my list, eggs. What's fascinating is that I didn't see eggs listed at the top of any other superfood charts out there. And that's a shame, because eggs are one of the most nutrient-packed foods available. The reason they get ignored is the same old fear this time about cholesterol and saturated fat. But that fear is completely misplaced. Eggs share many of the same benefits as meat, but they also bring something extra: choline. Choline is a vitamin-like nutrient that acts as a catalyst for fat metabolism. In other words, it helps your liver actually burn through stored fat, making it a direct ally in reversing fatty liver. Eggs are also rich in vitamins B, 6B, 9, and B12. Together, these vitamins help your body transform a harmful inflammatory compound called homocysteine into methionine. From there, methionine can be converted into glutathione, which, as we've discussed, is the body's most powerful antioxidant and detoxifier. And here's the kicker: not only do eggs provide the vitamins needed to process methionine, they're also an excellent natural source of methionine itself. On top of that, eggs deliver the essential fatty acids EPA and DHA, the very omega-3s that most people struggle to get enough of. If you choose pasture-raised eggs, the nutritional value skyrockets. These eggs contain many times more EPA and DHA than conventional eggs, meaning you can cover much of your daily need for essential fatty acids simply by including quality eggs in your diet. For all of these reasons, eggs get a huge green check mark from me. If any single food deserves the spotlight as a true superfood, it's eggs. If you found value in this breakdown, you're going to love the next video I've got for you. And if you truly want to master your health by understanding how the body really works, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a video that could change your life.